Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, the show that brings you weekly advice and news at the beginning of every weekend. Introducing first your co-hosts Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon.
Feels good to be back to regular programming. The regular season is just around the corner. Got the whole crew here. It's episode 68 of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. It's Saturday, August 31st. Crazy to think that August has flown by and we're almost into September. That means Mark and I are back to work this week. But we're talking fantasy MVPs, the guys that we think are going to lead our teams to fantasy success, to the ship. Championships are ahead of us here for the SMS crew. Boys, what has been going on?
Hey, yo, Mackie. I'm excited to get into football. This is last weekend was a busy draft week for me. This weekend is another one. I hope this is a great time for our listeners and this episode because we get to plant our flags. We get to tell everyone our guys and why we like them, and hopefully they can also draft our guys.
That's right. You got to put down who we believe in, why we believe in.
Yeah, I'm pretty amped about the episode this week because I think it really combines the two best elements of fantasy football and recording a podcast. Because fantasy is all about saying, I know who will be better than you will. And then recording a podcast is broadcasting it to the world. And 1 year from now, we're going to be looking back on this episode, and some guys are going to be really smug, and some guys are just going to be destroyed.
Definitely to the world, because we are now trending in the fantasy sports Iceland and fantasy sports Spain. So we are now global.
That's a hot market. That's a very hot market.
It really is.
It was
so hot.
Top
right
900 in Iceland for fantasy sports. Right, it's great.
Shout out Reykjavik.
Marky, what's good, homie?
Well, like Max said, we are going to be returning to work. For the listeners out there who don't know, I'm a school teacher.
As am I.
But sometimes I like to think it's the kids who teach me.
Well, most times, yes.
No, I'm kidding. But I do say that often. Actually, it's been an awesome week. I actually had the pleasure of chilling with Landon and Scott and Miles in the flesh. So kind of felt like, Mac, you were out of the picture.
I missed out.
But
yep. Just wasn't in the cards. I was holding out coming up to Thunder Bay just in case, job interviews and whatever. Had to make my way into school, and it didn't really pay off because I up until today I didn't have anything. But then I got a call from the principal of the school I was at last year, and he said, "Hey, got a opening for you. Love to have you back." So we're going into school tomorrow. Yeah. Woo!
That a kid.
Yeah, we're
In
going
free
into school
agent
tomorrow.
news, Mackenzie has been taken in the first round.
Put it on your sleeper notifications here.
Earth-shattering salary.
Yeah, I essentially got my position back.
Mackie, we could have gone into this year both without a job and just done fantasy football full time for free.
I would have loved that, but my wife would not have liked that.
Oh, and your mortgage payments?
Hey, win a couple leagues. That's mortgage payments money.
That is true. That is true. Speaking of winning leagues, a couple nice moves today in the listener league. Landon and I made some trades.
Oh. So, shout out to everyone listening. I know everyone's listening. This is one of the most active leagues I've ever been involved in. You guys are awesome.
Too active.
Super hyped. It's a ton of fun. This has been great, guys, despite the shade thrown on everyone.
Yeah, so the one trade that you and Eric made, go through that, Landon.
Yeah, so I mean, I wasn't really last week we talked about Devonta Freeman, and after he started off the year hot, I said to trade him and sell him high. Well, I guess Easy took that to heart and wanted to trade him before that happened. And I wasn't after him. I wanted Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
All along, that's who I wanted.
But you ain't getting him.
And I just kind of let that I sent offers for him. He rejected them. We went back and forth a few times, and he wanted my guy. He wanted Dede Westbrook and Emmanuel Sanders. And for me, we all saw Emmanuel Sanders ball out in preseason.
Oh, he flashed.
Absolutely. And if I'm a fantasy analyst, why would I not try to sell high on that hype? He might be good. He very well could be good all season long, but I might as well sell if I can at the high point.
Agreed.
But on Eric's sake, that's his guy. He likes Emmanuel Sanders. I hope he kills it this year, honestly. And he very well could with Joe Flacco. So he wanted my two guys. I wasn't after Freeman, but I said, all right, I'll take Freeman, but I need some help at wide receiver. So I also got Curtis Samuel in the deal. People are all kind of down on Curtis Samuel. I think he's going to be okay. Middling wide receiver, 2-ish, late 2. So I don't mind the trade. I kind of just got pretty good value for my two pretty decent wide receivers.
Yeah,
they were saying Curtis Samuel was impossible to cover at times in training camp. I really like this guy going into the season. That's a good pickup, Len.
Is that foreshadowing, Mark? No.
It kind of just fell on my lap.
No, I know.
I wasn't really after those two guys particularly.
I think with this trade too, like, and much to my own as well, like roster construction and team need really come into play. Like, Easy maybe thought like he needed 2 wide receivers, and he was willing to, part ways with Devonta Freeman to do that. And Taylor and I were in the same boat with our trade. It ended up being David Johnson, Austin Eckler, and Robert Woods for Todd Gurley, Darrell Henderson, Tyler Boyd, and Geronimo Allison. So for me, like, I have a really good wide receiving core, and I didn't draft as many running backs as I had hoped for. So I traded 2 wide receivers and a running back in exchange for 2 running backs and a wide receiver, which, it's team need, right? Like between David Johnson and Todd Gurley, there's concerns for both. There's upsides for both. It's a very lateral trade, I think, but it's more so just team need. And some people, aka Braden, didn't really like the trade, and that's fine. Like, people are entitled to their opinions, and everyone perceives players differently. Some people are really high on David Johnson, like myself, and other people are really concerned because the O-line is struggling, and there's a rookie quarterback and new offensive coordinator, head coach. Like, there's different ways to perceive each situation. So, but I like the activity.
Matt, the big thing with that one, you got the best running back out of the deal, and you got the best wide receiver out of the deal.
Well, some would say that Todd Gurley's better than David Johnson, though.
He wasn't drafted like that.
Well, no, he wasn't. But if you look at
and we don't project him like that either.
No, you're right. We don't. But some people do. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Right? That's not unfair to say.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Don't play devil's advocate on me right here. Get out of here.
All right.
Okay, but enough. But anyways, it's been fun so far. Like, I like the trades. I like the activity. I like the banter. The banter's lots of fun. But in case anything comes out before we get into the news section, we are recording a couple days early just because some of us had to go to work this week, and some of us are going to be out of town with the long weekend ahead. So we are recording on Wednesday evening, the 28th of August. You're going to hear this on Saturday, August 31st. So if anything comes out that we didn't cover, now you know why. But before we do that, wherever you guys are, however you may be listening, the 4 of us want to thank you so much for making us a part of your day. If you want to connect with the show, you can do so on Instagram and Twitter at SMS_fantasy. If you want to get the guys individually, their handles are in the episode description. So go ahead and click those links and get at the boys there. Let's jump into some news, fellas. So Andrew Luck retired, and we did talk about this news in depth extensively on our Patreon episode on Tuesday. So if you guys missed that, go ahead and get into our Patreon page, and you can listen to it there. But it was a really good episode, and we really covered that extensively. And the Patreon pod is uncut, so it's a little bit of a different vibe than we've got going on here. So if you're up for hearing something different and more interesting, that might be your spot. But
Yeah, and Mac, what we did is we actually analyzed all of our patrons' fantasy teams so far, and we will do that for any new patrons. Show us your teams, show us any trade offers you have. We're going to try to do our best to give you suggestions on where you should go, where you're weak, where you're really strong, kind of what you should do going forward, like I said, to easy there. And yeah, try to help you out as much as we can. We're basically on retainer at your beck and call whenever you need any fantasy advice.
Yeah, we said like we've got 7 patrons right now, and before anybody else, we're here for for those 7, and everybody else is comes second. So jumping into some news right now that's trending. Jimmy Garoppolo is indeed on track for week 1. On his comeback train. So that speaks really well to the 49ers offense, even though he, in the opening weeks of preseason hadn't looked that good. Last week did trend up and looked a little bit better. So Jimmy G, Garoppolo back on track, looking good for week 1. Hopefully that means good things for that offense, because I got a lot of stock in Tevin Coleman. So hopefully the ball's moving between the tenths.
And wide receiver owners in Raiderland will love to hear that John Gruden wants Derek Carr to throw it deep in 2019. So the question then has to come up, is he talking about the wide receiver across from Antonio Brown, Mr. Tyrell Williams? As we all know him as the deep threat guy. He certainly was with the Chargers, and that could be really interesting, as obviously Brown is definitely a deep threat, but Tyrell Williams, man, he has that speed.
He's straight up forgotten about too in drafts, essentially going undrafted.
Terrific.
Oh, yeah, it's brutal.
And almost with Landon's will, DK Metcalf, who just had knee surgery last week, was running today on turf.
It's crazy.
And people are optimistic. Now, Pete Carroll, Mr. Optimistic, expects him to play week 1, which is huge news for a guy that just went through that knee surgery. So maybe they weren't lying the whole time. Maybe Pete Carroll wasn't blowing smoke at us. Maybe DK could continue to impress and wow everyone in Seattle.
They did just call it cleanup surgery, so maybe for once it wasn't coach speak.
We all overreacted, maybe.
Maybe.
We'll see.
I did. I know I did. So the high-flying head coach, Bruce Arians of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, says when it comes game time, he'll go with the hot hand between Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones. My thoughts on this? Those guys are so close in both hype and ADP right now. It's honestly a really, really close matchup. But
Rojo's still going ahead, though. Like Rojo's still ahead of Peyton Barber, correct, in ADP? But not in depth chart.
They are literally neck and neck. I have them both at 1109 and half PPR ADP on Fantasy Calculator. They are 1109 and 1109.
What?
Thank you for that, Scott.
Wow.
132 and 133.
I don't think
overall.
Rojo's fallen that far. Really?
Can't make that up.
Huh.
Well, the San Francisco defense has a pretty nice looking front four, and they're going to be hard to outrun for either one of these guys. I just hope that Tampa Bay O-line comes out firing, because I really want them to win this game from an unbiased fantasy analyst point of view.
You are correct, Scott. 1109. They are literally tied.
Could not be closer. You don't see that very often, so that's special when that happens. I want to say
you get the Jordan Howard Miles Sanders split too, but they're in like the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, at least there's some separation. They're not literally. That's amazing that they're literally exactly the same spot. It's whatever you prefer at this point.
Mm-hmm. So listen, before we jump into planting our flags, choosing our fantasy MVPs, we want to talk about one of our partners. That is the boys over at Fanatic. So if you listen to this show, you probably like to hear those really data-driven fantasy nuggets that can make the difference for drafting or for week-to-week decisions. If you like that kind of thing, Fanatic brings that to you, and they do it in a really easy way that's, nicely presented, and you can understand a wealth of data at your fingertips. The news feed is great. We really like that. You can get a variety of different media sources for one topic. We're in the app, so our articles and our podcast get pushed to the app. So it really is a really good data source. So if you want to go ahead and check them out, it's FANATIQ on the App Store. It's Fanatic. Go ahead, check them out. You won't be disappointed. All right, fellas, let's plant some flags. Fantasy MVPs that are just, every single draft we do are ending up on our teams. The guys that we believe in, that we think might return more value than currently they're drafting in ADP or how they're being ranked. I'm going to kick it off. Chris Godwin. I've talked about him at length. I wrote a love letter to him on our Patreon. You guys probably saw this coming. I was in, long consideration to say, Geronimo Allison's going to be my wide receiver, my guy this year, and I had to go with Chris Godwin, man. I just look at this offense, and it starts with Bruce Arians. He's a risky head coach. He loves to be aggressive. He loves to get the ball downfield. He loves to pass, and he really, when you talk about this backfield, like Mark just alluded to, between Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber, Dare, I can't pronounce his last name. He's going to be involved a little bit too. They have a limited backfield, though. There's no real clear starter right now, and I think that bodes well for the pass catchers in this offense. And when we look at Bruce Arians, I've already mentioned this in a previous pod, 14 seasons as a head coach or offensive coordinator. In those 14 seasons, he has fed 100-plus targets to his top 2 wide receivers in 8 of those seasons. That's insane. And we're not talking just Mike Evans. We're talking Mike Evans and Chris Godwin could see over 100 targets each. And last year, Chris Godwin saw 95 targets. They didn't have Jameis the whole year. So in the time that Winston was with, I'm going to call him Sea God. Okay, that's going to be my nickname for this guy, Sea God. He targeted him in the end zone, 28.6% end zone target share in 2018 under Winston. And even Mike Evans, who is, heralded by most as the number one in this offense, he said in an interview they did with Kurt Warner, he's like, how do you feel about Chris Godwin picking up the number 2 role? And he's like, number 2? Chris Godwin, man, he's great. We're actually competing for the number 1. I love Chris Godwin. I think he's great. I think in this scheme with Arians and Winston back under the helm, when you factor in his 4.4 speed, he has great separation and one of the highest points per target in the league at 1.93 points. I'm all in on Chris Godwin if he's going to get over 100 targets this year. I think he's going to be great. His ADP right now is 406. I think he is easily a lock for top 20 wide receiver. But Scott, why don't you take us down your road here? No one's heard you talk about this player before recently, so do your best.
All right. Well, for my first flag to be planted, I'm going with a player that I think a lot of people have kind of not necessarily forgotten about, but they look at last season and say that will absolutely be the peak of the mountain, and there's a regression coming. And thanks to that, I think his ADP is a pretty decent value right now. I'm talking about Tyler Lockett, wide receiver out of Seattle. So he is at 409 average ADP right now. The reason I'm so high on Tyler Lockett, obviously, yes, I think he's trending over the past month upwards. He looked great in the preseason. We all know the story about Doug Baldwin retiring. Last season, he had just shy of 1,000 yards on only 57 receptions. Like, the efficiency there, yards per reception was pretty spectacular. And he managed 10 touchdowns. And that's well fighting with Baldwin for those targets. Now, Baldwin's gone, and he gets to now be the full-time slot receiver where he got most of those yards. Like, I think he is an excellent slot receiver, and that is now officially his spot. We talked about Metcalf a little earlier. He's supposed to be back week 1, but I think a lot of people were saying, Metcalf's going to take away from Tyler Lockett. For a guy who barely even was able to run in warm-ups for preseason games, I really don't think Metcalf's going to be able to take much away from Tyler Lockett, especially early in the season where he's just going to be trying to get his foot in as a rookie. So I think 409 for Tyler Lockett is going to be a really good price when this season is all said and done. I think that although it's a run-first offense, I think that when he's not handing it off to the running backs, I think that Russell Wilson's looking to throw the ball. I don't think he's going to be running much this season, and I think he's going to be looking for Lockett.
What do you think about his efficiency last year, Scott, with like touchdowns? He had 10 touchdowns on 70 targets, not receptions, targets. That's a lot of efficiency. What do you think 2019 brings for Tyler Lockett?
You know, I mean, I see why a lot of people think there's going to be a regression because that percentage is like ungodly. But that being said, the same can be said when you look at Russell Wilson's stats. So I really don't think that it's going to be that much of a stretch to think he will fall within the same category because the quarterback is the same. It's going to be probably relatively the same type of game plan, right? Where they're going to be running the ball a lot, and when he does throw it, it's going to be an efficient throw. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden open it up this season. They have very few ball catchers. So I think it's going to be an efficient offense, and with the receiving core the way it is, I think he's definitely going to be a lock for good numbers.
See, Scotty, I like your love for Lockett. I just think the volume actually is going to go up. Like, I think he's going to get more targets. Right. It's hard to keep that level of efficiency. Like, it's just unparalleled. Yes, maybe Russell Wilson's just a super efficient quarterback, but I think there's also just he's gonna regress back to the. Like, he just can't sustain that kind of efficiency is, I guess, what I'm trying to get.
And I'm not necessarily saying he will, but I mean, I guess from a fantasy perspective, okay, sure, but from a fantasy perspective, like, do you care about the efficiency necessarily? I mean, yes, obviously you want him to get a bunch of touchdowns, but
because if he gets the same amount of targets, he's not going to get.
But you said you said the volume would be higher. Do you mean Tyler Lockett's volume will be higher, or the? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's going to get more targets, less efficient. He's still going to be good. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm disagreeing with your logic behind it.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think him getting 10 touchdowns again would be completely out of the question. I'm not saying it would be on 57 receptions. Essentially, I'm saying I don't think there'll be a regression in his overall stats. If he's targeted more...
That's what I'm saying, though. 17.5% of his receptions were touchdowns. That's insane.
Yeah, and that is insane. That is insane. So I guess the proper thing to say is I think there'd be a regression in his touchdown percentage per catch.
Correct.
But I think I do think he will be seeing more option as their WR1 in the slot where he naturally excels. So overall, I think his stats are going to be similar as far as fantasy perspective. Because you don't gain extra efficiency points. I know you want touchdowns, but if he gets, more volume and gets the same amount of touchdowns, you're still sitting pretty.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Marky, you haven't talked in a bit. You want to talk about your MVP?
All right. This is a guy that should be no stranger that I'm a fan of. This is Dante Pettis of the San Francisco 49ers. So... we got to look at this offense. They're heading into week 1 against Tampa Bay, and that's a team that has been shredded by wide receivers in the past, and I expect Pettis to come out firing from the gate. He's like, you got to think on this offense right now, lots of inclusion of rookie wide receivers on this offense and a bit of negative publicity on his failure to make strides in the offseason, but I still think it's no question that he's the number one there in San Francisco. He was so impressive over the span of 12 games last year, putting up 27 receptions, 467 yards, and 5 TDs. I don't take like the pressure on him as a negative. I hope it's an opportunity for him to step up and excel. We know that on this offense, they've added a lot of key pieces, and they're going to be riding the momentum going into the season with that George Kittle had with his unreal season in 2018. So they've got multiple weapons. It's not like Pettis is going to be the only option out there. And I can understand some haters thinking, like, what about a poor preseason? But I think this guy, he just needs to get more locked into the games, because I think he's going to be loaded up and ready to get some hopefully better passes from Jimmy G, because, you know, Pettis wasn't the only one playing bad. There was some terrible throws put his way as well. But one other thing about Pettis is he has total added upside as a return man as well. Like, he has such amazing cut speed and great footwork. So I'm just excited at the upside that he brings from that part of his game.
Yeah, when you actually watched Dante Pettis play last year, he was good, and he made people really believe in him. Early in the preseason, he was a guy that was skyrocketing up draft boards, but people are going too far on the other side when they have a poor preseason, I think, you know?
Yep. Very, very true. And I think unwarranted for Dante Pettis. Some people think that, him being told by the coaches he has to earn his role is just a motivational tactic. You know, whether it be a good or bad decision, that's to be seen. But I don't think Dante Pettis deserves 9th round value. But it's great if you're in a keeper league, because you might get a really good value on him for next year.
Agreed.
For sure. So my guy, my MVP, guy I'm going to plant my flag on, is the guy that I just traded away. And that is Didi.
Oh, that makes sense, Landon.
Right? Doesn't that make sense? But I mean,
it's a ploy. It's just a clever ruse, just like everything Landon does.
Buy high and sell low.
Yeah. So he now has Nick Foles, and I'm super excited that he has Nick Foles. Last year, Nick Foles had a 72.3% completion percentage. Despite being with the Rams, he still carries a career 62.5 career completion percentage. And Didi had a really big second-year leap, catching over 65% of his targets while maintaining that 100 targets. Sorry, 65%. Yeah, I said that right. So that's important to see. If someone has such a high completion percentage compared to the rest, but still has that kind of targets, that's a big difference. I think that's really why that people do like Westbrook this year, and that was with Blake Bortles last year. So with Nick Foles at the helm, I think there's a ton of upside. The preseason game went the other way, where like Dante Pettis is getting kind of crapped on. Didi Westbrook saw like 7 targets in the first few drives and caught most of them. He looked awesome. So next, the Jaguars brought in John DeFilippo, who got fired from the Vikings for passing too much. Like, that just bodes well for the offense and the pass catchers. Foles will be asked to do a lot, and I think so far, he's going to lean on Didi. I don't think Keelan Cole, DJ Chark, anyone else in that offense can do the same things and has the same kind of upside that Didi has. So, but also everyone knows about Didi now. He was Mike Wright's my guy, so we've heard this all before. But his ADP is still at this back of the 6th round, so grab him while you can, and I think you can count on him as a real solid wide receiver 2 with upside on your team, or 2-3 with upside.
Yeah, he's 25th right now in our rankings, so we're right on that cusp of a wide receiver 2/3.
Yeah, for sure.
And I never thought that I would say this, but we're actually going to have 2 Jacksonville Jaguars in our My Guys. I got Leonard Fournette here as my fantasy MVP for running backs. I actually tried to acquire Leonard Fournette today in our listener league from Scuba Steve. It just didn't work out. I ended up doing another deal with Taylor, but I tried to get Leonard Fournette. And the reason why I love Leonard Fournette as a bounce back candidate, right now he's going in the back of the second, 212. Last year he only played 8 games, and he was plagued by injuries, had some off-field issues to deal with. It wasn't a good year for Leonard Fournette. But if we flash back to his rookie year in 2017, Jacksonville was the number 1 team in running plays, ran at 526. Leonard Fournette broke 1,000 yards in only 13 games. And then in the year, like last year, with Leonard Fournette only playing 8 games, they were 12th in rushing. So they were still in the top third of the league at 416 running plays. They bring in John DiFilippo as the new OC for the Jags, and he's talked about feeding Leonard Fournette pass catching work. And yes, this bodes well, like his system bodes really well for D.D. Westbrook, but I think it also bodes well for Leonard Fournette because he's going to get his carries. They have to run plays. And Leonard Fournette is a great, like he's a great back. Rookie year, 268 carries, 1,000 yards. They didn't have a passing game under Blake Bortles in that time, and he broke 1,000 yards, seeing 8 or more defenders in the box on 48.5% of his carries, which was crazy high compared to LeGarrette Blount leading that stat last year at 38. So he saw a crazy amount of defenders and still broke 1,000 yards in only 13 games. If Leonard Fournette comes back healthy, refocused, he's going to be an absolute beast in this offense. And I think John DiFilippo there, Leonard Fournette ready to go. He's an absolute stud in the 3rd round.
Lots of Jags coming off the board early on.
It's crazy. It's crazy times.
What a world. What a world we live in. All right, moving on to my second MVP candidate. A guy who also, I guess you could say, is looking for a bounce-back year, but as I'll get into, I don't think that's quite fair. My second guy is the quarterback out of Minnesota, Mr. Kirk Cousins. Now, the main reason that he's one of my guys is his value. He's currently going at 1207, behind a decent amount of quarterbacks that I really think he has more upside for as your starting quarterback this year. So, first of all, like I said, bounce-back candidate, that's more, I feel, in real football than in fantasy. Last year, he put up, he had a career high in touchdowns. He had 30 touchdowns last season, threw for over 4,000 yards. And this was all in his first year with a new offense, with a horrendous offensive line. One of the main reasons I think he's in for an improvement this year, even on those numbers, is primarily based on I'm expecting a better performance out of the O-line of the Minnesota Vikings. They used their first-round pick on shoring up that center position, and now you've got players able to get to their more natural position on the line now that they have an anchor at center. I don't know how many people watched the Vikings offense last season, but I had never seen as many passes just get batted down by defensive linemen. It was an every week affair. And I really think that on top of that, a healthy Dalvin Cook, although that perhaps could bring down the volume, I think that's going to have opposing defenses stacking the box a bit more if he can stay healthy this season. And, maybe he'll actually catch some balls out of the backfield, and that could kind of help the overall stats for Cousins. Kirk Cousins has one of the elite, if not the elite, wide receiver duos in the NFL. And maybe if you throw in Rudy having a bit of a bounce-back year himself, I think that Kirk Cousins could finish way higher than his current ADP of 1207. So as far as quarterbacks go, I love the value return you're getting on Captain Kirk in his second year with this, hopefully, full firepower offense.
I think it's crazy, his ADP where it is. I mean, we're talking a guy that has 4 straight seasons, over 4,000 yards passing, just to clip the 30 touchdown mark last year, 5% touchdown percentage, and a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, like you alluded to, 2 top 15 wide receivers. It's crazy that Kirk Cousins is going so low.
I don't get it. And personally, when I see guys like Winston and a few others ahead of him, I couldn't help myself. In our listener league draft, you saw it. Kirk Cousins as a backup. If I had to slot him in as a starter, you know what? And against most defenses, I'd feel pretty confident.
Okay, moving on. Talking to you guys about my next guy to stick a flag into, and that's Phillip Lindsay. He is finished as the undrafted rookie, the running back one in Denver, and I love that. His season was amazing. He was a joy to watch on the field, but that's just because he is a dangerous guy in open space. He's an explosive runner, and he has really good cuts. So I'm expecting him to have improved that. He had a bit of a wrist injury, but I think he's going to come back swinging. And there's a lot of people that are criticizing, saying, this bit of injury might cause more competition in his backfield. But looking at Lindsey's 2018, on 192 carries, he had over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. But that is also to be mentioned in the same wavelength as his 35 receptions for 240 yards. So he's just clearly a dual threat type player, more so than Royce Freeman. There's a lot of hype saying that it's going to be essentially a 50-50 split. But frankly, if Royce Freeman couldn't do it last year, I don't know what kind of adjustments they would want to make.
Agreed.
It's almost like they would be capping what is otherwise a good opportunity for a repeat performance here from Lindsey. So I'm loving this guy. I think he's going to come back and surprise a lot of critics.
I agree. I think the hype on Royce Freeman is unwarranted. It's just like Ronald Jones. I don't think it has any reason to exist other than people that believed in them last year that didn't get it are just sort of pushing that narrative again this year, and there's really nothing that says, yeah, that's going to happen. So I love Phillip Lindsay. I think he's great. I had a chance to grab him in our at home, our what do you call it, home league the other night. I took Tevin Coleman over Phillip Lindsay. It didn't feel good, but it was maybe a tilt pick. I don't know.
Might have been tilt. We were both tilting in that draft,
a little bit.
And so next, I'm going to talk about a guy who I've been getting everywhere. His ADP is super low, and I'm going to talk about Peyton Barber, another Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Mac, we're going shot for shot here with these.
Bring it on.
Woo! Fire the cannons, boy!
So last year he got over 230 attempts. Everyone thought, including myself, that Ronald Jones, his speed would outlast everyone else, and he would. The cream will rise to the top, and he's going to outperform Peyton Barber. But he fended him off, and there's no reason why he's not going to fend him off again. Bruce Arians on that offense obviously was great for David Johnson a few years ago, and I think even though Peyton Barber's an undrafted guy, I think he's going to use him to the best of the ability. I'm not concerned with Gumbawale. I'm not, he's not going to be, he could be a return.
You got to teach me how to say that name, by the way.
He might be sprinkled in there on third down, because I for sure, my heart's not with Ronald Jones. And I even did an article thinking that it might be earlier this offseason, but I'm totally on the Peyton Barber train, and he's going to the back the 11th round. I don't understand why. He has upper percentile agility. I think if you can get a starting running back at the back of the 11th round, I know it might feel a bit ugly, but just do it. Right. There's no risk. And even if he doesn't do it and Barber shows out or Dyer.
Yeah, we got to figure that out.
Dare? I'm saying Dare.
Agumbawale.
It's not a big risk. You're not taking him early. So this is a plant my play guy based on ADP and based on the offensive scheme of Arians.
Yeah. And when we get into the last four guys here, we are really talking about ADP. I mean, Landon and Scott, I appreciate you bringing up Kirk Cousins and Peyton Barber, because I think they represent a lot of upside. But so do the last four guys that we're talking about. And I'm going to jump into the tight end landscape. It's an ugly, ugly spot in fantasy football, but there are some diamonds in the rough. And I've talked about this player at length, especially in our NFC South divisional preview a couple weeks ago. But Austin Hooper right now going at the 11:06. I love this Atlanta Falcons offense. There is a crazy world where we could see a running back one, a wide receiver one, a tight end one, and a QB one all on the same team. And last year, Austin Hooper was the tight end 7.5 PPR. He was, if you look at his season last year, measured top 10 in the following metrics: total targets, red zone targets, yards, red zone receptions, and true catch rate. All top 10 across the tight end position. That is what it is, because the tight end landscape is not amazing. But Hooper was top 5 in receptions and target separation, and he was number 1 in catch rate at 80.7%. Now, some would say there's going to be regression coming. 80% catch rate is crazy, and Michael Thomas did it last year at 85%. However, this is an offense that likes to throw the ball a lot. We project them to throw over 600 times this season and be a top 5 passing offense once again. I think for you getting Austin Hooper in the middle of the 11th round, you really present no loss in major draft capital, but you have a whole lot to gain, especially at a position that is so scarce. So Austin Hooper, another top 10 performance coming this year, and you can get him in the 11th round. I love it.
When we're talking about diving for diamonds in the rough at the tight end position, I got to talk about my guy. This was my original guy, the very first article that I put out for our Patreon readers. I loved him back then when he had a lot to rehab from. There was a lot of questions up in the air. Would he play? Would he not? I'm talking about 35-year-old tight end out of Tennessee, Mr. Delanie Walker. He was the original MVP of mine early this season, and it's only going to get better from here. Why do I love him? First of all, at the 10:06 ADP, we're looking at value. You're looking at a potential top 10 tight end in the 10th round. I think we can all agree that's pretty good value for that ADP capital. So Delanie Walker, before last season, which we all know was the freak ankle injury, beginning of the season, right off season, he has been a top tight end in fantasy for 4 straight seasons. So if you discount last year's write-off, you have a chance at grabbing one of the elite wide tight ends at the end of the at the beginning of the 10th round. Now, Tennessee is a run-heavy offense with Derrick Henry, but chain-moving tight ends in the middle. That's a great compliment. And then the last 2 parts, he's Mariota's favorite target. We saw a massive uptick when he got to Tennessee with Mariota. And on top of that, Delanie Walker is healthy, and he is pissed off with everything to prove, with all the doubters saying he is not healthy and he's too old. I see him having a big year, and I just think at 10:06, he is definitely my guy.
Yeah, your bet right now with Landon, Jack Doyle versus Delanie Walker is looking really good for you, Scotty.
Gotta say, I'm pretty happy about how it's looking right now. He's been looking great in the preseason.
Hey, it's not over yet.
Yeah, that AFC South hasn't had enough shaking moments yet. Who knows what's going to happen in a week. So moving on, I have got a quarterback as my last guy here. He's someone that should be on anyone's fantasy radar just because his ADP is ridiculous. At the 11:10, Dak Prescott. So let me just start this by saying the narrative of a Cowboys quarterback going gangbusters this season is one that I love and also one that America loves. So
No.
Need I go on?
No, they don't.
No, but I will. He's one of those players that we've talked about this idea of a running quarterback getting the points in multiple facets on the field. He's built like a running back, and that's why he's so dangerous, right? He's an aggressive player. He's a great leader, and I think. If he's able to increase on what he did last year once Cooper joined the team, like he has a great looking personnel around him right now, especially if everyone makes it to the field, and he always does. That's one thing that I can't say enough about is the fact that he doesn't miss games. In his past seasons, he has just showed nothing but positivity, and that makes for a guy I want to have on a fantasy football team, and that's championship material right there, baby.
Heck yeah.
Hey, Marky, I like that. When you brought up the Dallas Cowboys, I just went to my phone to refresh Sleeper just to see if Zeke Elliott has signed yet. Shocking, he has not.
I like Dak a whole lot more with Zeke on the field, for the record.
Big time.
Correct. We expect him to play. Let's go. All right, I'll finish us off here. I got my man, my tight end. I got Mark Andrews. Last year, he had 50 targets, 34 receptions, and 550 yards. He led all rookie tight ends in receptions. He had more yards last year than Michael Gallup, Anthony Miller, Dante Pettis, Traquan Smith, Kiki QT. Damn. His final year in college, he was arguably Baker Mayfield's number one target. He had more targets than the phenom first round pick Marquise Brown. Like, that's bananas. He is a 6'5", 256-pound athletic freak, and I think that if there's a tight end that can make that leap, make that George Kittle leap, I think it could be Mark Andrews.
That's big praise.
I know. Lamar Jackson's getting better. He's getting some serious hype. He's rocketing up draft boards. And I think it's most to do with his running ability, but also he's looking great passing the ball as well. He got better every year in college. I think he's going to get better every year in the NFL. And yeah, let's go, Mark Andrews. I got him everywhere.
You even got him for me on my draft.
That's true.
I wish I drafted him in our rookie draft, but Max snagged him.
You got like
thinking
5 of the guys we talked about today for me. So.
Let's go.
So before we close things up here, just to recap, my guys here, my fantasy MVPs, Chris Godwin of the Buccaneers, Leonard Fournette of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Austin Hooper of the Atlanta Falcons.
And my guys are Tyler Lockett, slot wide receiver from Seattle, Kirk Cousins, the man in Minnesota, and the aging wonder Delaney Walker, tight end out of Tennessee.
I'm going Dede Westbrook, Peyton Barber, and Mark Andrews.
And I am taking Dante Pettis, Phillip Lindsay, and Dak Prescott.
Pretty good lineup, boys.
I'm going to special shout out Justice Hill as my guy. He didn't make my list, but I love him dearly. Josh Allen, Cam Newton, higher quarterbacks that I also like.
That's fair to say. All right, the moment we've been waiting for about a month now, we had a Madden giveaway on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our Patreon. We have 7 patrons who all got an extra 10 ballots, so it's pretty hard to outdo them. And pulling from our database right now, we've logged all the entries. There's about 250 entries here. Drum roll, please. Congratulations to Ricky Elliott, the winner of the Madden 20 giveaway.
Oh,
He is actually one of our patrons.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Oh, I thought that one of our patrons would win. I thought it might be Easy Eric. He had like 25 entries. Really was the front runner. Ricky had 16, so he's right in the running too. So congratulations, Ricky. Reach us on Patreon. We'll send you a message there, Patreon, sorry, and we'll get the code over to you for the Madden 20. Man, enjoy it.
Congratulations.
Let's go.
All right, boys. So for all of us, thanks for hanging out with us and kicking it. And the next time you hear us, we're going to be previewing Week 1 of the NFL season and talking about the Thursday night game. I'm so excited. Football's around the corner. Our drafts, for me, are personally done, but I know some of you might be drafting this week. So if you guys want to reach out, get some advice, you know where to get us on social. And until then, we'll see you later.
Happy drafting.
Good weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/SaturdayMorningSnap.